Hey, IT changemakers, and welcome to the DEX Show with Tom McGraw. Let's get into it.
I did say we were not going to be talking about football for much longer, and I'm going to keep to my promise, everybody. No more football conversations, despite the fact I've got an English and an American guest today. Moving on after our football season on the show. Listen, I want to thank everybody who was able to attend the AMA over on our subreddit the other week, featuring Leslie Beavers from former CIO of the Department of Defense. It was a really phenomenal event. We know we had 2,500 people tune in for it live. If you haven't seen it, if you haven't caught up with it, do hop over and take a look. There'll be a link in the show notes. And it gives me great pleasure to announce we're going to be doing another, if you will, DEX show hosted AMA over on the new Nexthink subreddit. This one, the star of it, we're going to meet in 1 second. He's one of our guests, one of our aforementioned guests today. But just a word about the AMA. We've called it, it's a creative DEX AMA beyond the service desk. We want people to think of it a bit of an open workshop, a bit of an AMA. So it features Christopher Ord, remote IT engineer, senior staff for Qualcomm. We're going to say hi to Christopher in a second. And he's going to be answering questions about Qualcomm. You're going to get some inspiration for the very, very innovative things Qualcomm is doing with DEX right here momentarily. It's going to be a chance to delve into those in a bit more detail, but we'd love other people to bring their own inventive Nexthink DEX use cases, ideas, problems, challenges to the event as well. It takes place, I should say, Wednesday the 22nd, so that's this week. It's at 4 p.m. EST. You can register and set your reminder by following the link in the show notes. And we look forward to seeing you there. We've loved doing these. We've loved seeing so many people turn up. We've loved seeing people interact with the subreddit and give it a subscribe. And we really, really appreciate it. On with the show, and let's welcome him, first-time guest to the DEX show. Chris, welcome to the DEX show, sir. It's great to see you.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here and talk about my experience with Nexthink and our partners and answer any questions anybody has.
Superb. We've got a really great discussion planned today, Chris. Can't wait to delve into it. And let's welcome, as a part of that discussion, our second guest today, my fellow Englishman, my fellow heartbroken Englishman, you might even go so far as to say, and a returnee guest to the DEX show. He's Seth White, co-founder and CEO of Elllypsys. Seth, great to see you back on the show. How you doing, mate?
Doing great. It's been a tough week for the Brits, of course, especially the English. But no, absolute pleasure to be back here to talk all things DEX and see what fun topics we can dive into today.
I am excited, gentlemen. So Chris, let's start with a bit of a guided tour, as it were, of DEX at Qualcomm, right? Covering the scale of the deployment, which has always been quite notable, and the fundamentals that you have there in terms of proactive IT as it's deployed in 2026 at Qualcomm.
Yeah, absolutely. Qualcomm's been a Nexthink customer for nearly 6 years now. The unique thing about Qualcomm's implementation is their original purchase use case was unusual in that the engage functionality was one of the primary reasons that we purchased the product. The ability to reach out to the end users and communicate with them in such a quick and immediate way and to solicit feedback has been extremely valuable here. So that's been one of the strongest themes here at Qualcomm is the use of that tool. In terms of scope and scale, initially we have sort of two fleets at Qualcomm. We have our primary laptop fleet that all of our employees use for productivity. That's about 50,000 strong, and initially that's what our deployment was limited to. But we saw the value of the product, as we deployed it out to those, and so within a couple of years we expanded to our full fleet. So our entire lab fleet is also covered. So we're hovering around 115,000 endpoints currently. In terms of our use cases, I mean, the strongest one, of course, is our campaign functionality. We use it to notify users of downtime, solicit feedback on rollouts. I mean, one of our strongest has been our customer zero project, where we rolled our own Snapdragon laptops out to our employees as customer zero, and used that tool extensively to solicit feedback on what their experience was with the laptops. Um, we've used it extensively for, firefighting when large issues come up. When we get something reported, we can find the scale of it in Nexthink far faster than we can waiting for tickets or employee reports. We can use it to proactively identify issues. Start to see blue screens creeping up or boot times creeping up. We can immediately dig into those issues and try to resolve them before the tickets come in. And lately, we've really been ramping up our use of Flow with the help of the Elllypsys team, who has really accelerated our proactive progress here, to start building in proactive remediation workflows, where if we're detecting crashes with Teams or Outlook or some other application, we can reach out to the employee proactively and remediate the issue without them even having to reach out to our service desk. And so it's been very helpful for those types of use cases, reducing our ticket load and just making it a better experience for our employees.
Fascinating. Tell us, Chris, you mentioned the Snapdragon use case there. Most listeners are going to know what you're talking about, but if they don't, maybe set the scene a little bit and tell us a bit more about that campaign, because it's such an unorthodox, striking use of DEX, I feel, and I'd be really interested to hear about how that went, where it was insightful and useful, and what you think it tells us about the kind of growing relevance of DEX more broadly.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been actually a very exciting project and a great use of the platform. So for those who aren't familiar, Qualcomm develops the Snapdragon processors. Most of you have these if you have any sort of an Android phone, and if you don't, you probably have our modems in your iPhones. But we took all of the lessons learned from the Snapdragon phone development and applied it into developing processors for laptops, with the idea of all-day battery life becoming an actual reality, as opposed to just a marketing talking point. Um, and so, with the advent of the X Elite processors coming out, I think about 2 years ago now, we of course wanted to roll it out to our own employees first to test them in our environment. And as we rolled them out in successively larger waves, just like you would any change management project, we used Nexthink to monitor the experience both quantitatively of the users that are on those laptops versus the users that were on the then current x86 platform. So we were able to compare those two against each other directly to see how the change was affecting them quantitatively in their daily experience. But we also use the engage functionality to query them on their qualitative experience to get the sentiment from them on users of the x64, x86 type laptops, which at the time was a Ryzen model, and then our X Elite laptops directly. And so we sent the same campaign with just slightly different wording, but with no notification that we're using it for any comparison basis. We sent the same campaign to both groups of users in about the same quantity. Initially a few hundred on each, and then we ramped up to getting over 22,000 responses by the end of the project, comparing them directly against each other and getting the feedback from the users. And the feedback was, obviously what we wanted to hear in general is that everybody was happier on the Snapdragon devices. They were getting better battery life. Our boot times were faster. We were seeing that both quantitatively as well as in the sentiment feedback. And we also did get feedback on issues that users were experiencing on the rollout of a brand new technology. And by getting that feedback directly and quickly, we could send that back to our engineers and get the issues resolved much faster, closing the loop and ensuring that when we release the products to our other customers, that they also will have that same positive experience for their employees, which in the end is what we're all trying to do. We're trying to create a better experience for the end users in their daily lives and reduce that IT frustration, whether that's better performance, better battery life, plugging in less, faster boot times after an update, etc. And we were able to actually see real-time comparisons in the environment with the full IT stack, all of the security tools across both fleets, and not just rely on some sort of a survey that may or may not get some feedback. And the other advantage of the engaged surveys is you get much higher returns on feedback than you would on say an emailed survey.
It's so interesting. I mean, do you feel it just occurred to me to ask this, Chris, that we're maybe entering a world where kind of DEX telemetry is becoming just as important for hardware decisions as it is for supporting end users? Like, where do you see those two currents kind of fusing at the moment, or running into each other, I should say?
I think it's absolutely at that point now. Both for us internally, I mean, it proved out our decision to roll it out. It is our standard device in our fleet now. All refreshes and new hires are Snapdragon devices. But we've also seen it with our customers. When we attended Experience last year, we presented on this, and we offered up this dashboard that we had built with the comparison between the two devices to our customers to see the same results in their own environment, so they could make the same decisions based on the same measurable, reportable data that we had. And our feedback from the customers has been phenomenal. They love seeing both our data, because we share that with them willingly, as well as their own data. Instead of the take my word for it marketing, they see it in real time, both in our environment as well as in their own environment with their own security stack and IT tools and use cases. It really helps them to validate the decisions and provide data to decision makers so that they can make the decisions based on hard metrics that are repeatable and reportable at scale.
Mm. Seth, we recorded an episode earlier this year, I think, right? About Elllypsys and obviously making a big impact in the DEX industry at the moment, mate. And congratulations on that. Maybe for listeners who missed that, set the scene a little bit and use the partnership with Qualcomm to illustrate what it is Elllypsys does so well.
Thank you. So yeah, bit of context. Ellipsis is now entering sort of its third year since inception. Prior to Ellipsis, I've been with Nexthink for over a decade. So I had the absolute tremendous opportunity to bring this incredibly powerful technology to major enterprises across Northern Europe, England, right? And then was subsequently relocated to North America, where that journey continued on, and ultimately saw the opportunity to kind of see where to really unlock the full potential of Nexthink and DEX by doing that in a capacity, which means that we're able to connect and work with customers such as the beloved Qualcomm, who are with us now. And so Ellipsys really is, in short, we're on a singular mission: 100% DEX, 100% Nexthink, enabling enterprises to maximize the value, right? So we'll go into all the details as to how that's done, etc. But to the point of Qualcomm and what Chris is referring to here, what we really love about the relationship we have with Qualcomm is it really does reflect how we believe DEX should work, right? So as a business, we don't want to be a partner, right, that comes in, implements a few generic use cases, dashboards, packs, whatever it may be, then either disappears. And we also don't want to be someone who hoards the customer's data and says, hey, when you want something, let us know and we'll come back to you, right? So with Qualcomm, and as what Chris has very eloquently summarized, it means helping enterprises take the technology and continuously connect it to what the business is actually trying to achieve, right? So what problems are we trying to solve? Where is there friction emerging? Where can we automate? What should we measure? And how do we, though, ultimately continually evolve the platform as the organization itself evolves? So everything Chris just mentioned leads right into that, from go-to-market strategy with their own products and services. And that sort of matches with our philosophy of adopting the technology, which means getting the capability established, right? Getting the technology going, transform, right? Is turning the data into sort of meaningful change, right? In an organized manner, not going into what we call the use case frenzy mode. But third, most importantly, getting customers to that strategic operating capability, which means they're able to ensure DEX and Nexthink doesn't ever become static, right? It doesn't become this reactive, yet another tool sitting on a shelf. So that's how we see it. And the goal is really ultimately there to, we always, what we found, there's sort of the SaaS revolution. We've become really good at buying technology, looking at it, observing features. But what we're really focused on is the operating capability. How do you work in a continuous, sustainable manner that drives genuine business value, right? And that's our sort of core philosophy. And that's where we're enjoying. And obviously, you can hear from Chris, working with them. They're doing absolutely amazing. So yeah, really good fun.
Seth, just honing in on that a little bit. What do you think that says about DEX, or as you put it, SaaS more generally, right? That there is this need for operationalization or operational expertise at the moment.
Yeah, so SaaS in general over the past, let's say, 15, probably 20 years, right? SaaS has made technology very easy to acquire, right? It's very easy to build, right? Especially now, right? And it's become increasingly even easier to deploy. But that can often lure us into enterprises, especially into a false sense of security, and create this illusion, right, that deployment equals value, or tasks and activities equals value. Busy work equals value. It doesn't, right? So what's happening now is that a platform can give you a capability, but the operational layer really determines what you do with that capability every day. And that's where there is what I kind of call sometimes a bit of SaaS fatigue. It's like, okay, here we go again, right? So the really, what I would say to kind of how that, the operational layer side of things, is we're looking at this and trying to understand and interpret the data correctly, and what decisions actually matter, and how does an insight become a real action, and aligning that all together. So I think DEX, though, itself makes this especially obvious. Nexthink makes this problem really obvious because you're buying, right, visibility of the consumption of IT. With Nexthink, you have this previously unobtainable view of how you're consuming absolutely everything from the user's perspective. How do applications change, devices change, employees experience, and everything. So the operating model kind of has to evolve with it. So I think that sort of challenge, DEX has kind of really shone a light on, actually, yes, there is a ton of potential, because naturally DEX impacts and influences everything. Security, compliance, infrastructure operations, cloud infrastructure, the list goes on, networks, apps, everything. And I think that's kind of what's happened. It's really created this immense opportunity to take things to a whole nother level. But of course, you have to have the operating layer behind it as well. So that's the connection between platform and actual execution.
One reason, Seth, I was really excited to get you both on the show was this theme of creativity, which is, again, what we're going to be returning to at the AMA this week. And talking to you guys a couple of weeks ago really made me think about how a lot of the, if you will, all the truly great modern technologies, they facilitate creativity. They enable users in ways that go typically well beyond what their creators might have originally envisaged, or even they might not bother envisaging, trying to envisage how things are going to be made. They simply provide that capability, provide that open-ended innovation space, if you will. Why is it you think Nexthink fits this category? And if you do,
so
and how is creativity kind of manifested in this partnership and others?
Yeah, I think answering that, for me, it's like probably the favorite thing about it. So the thing that excites me most about Nexthink, and always has, is at its core, you have this extraordinary, not just amount of data, but context of what is actually happening across the entire digital workplace. It's a big statement, and it covers a lot of domains. And once you have the data, the question then becomes, right, what can you do with it? So then insert creativity here. So the answer increasingly comes from the creativity of the people closest to the business. Everything Chris has just summarized demonstrates creativity as it relates to their unique challenges and opportunities and execution as an enterprise. So we see customers will often start with traditional use cases around performance, stability, employee experience, and then suddenly this conversation explodes and expands. Can we identify, very difficult to see unused software and reclaim it? Can we validate a transformation? Can we understand the impact and risk and opportunity behind a merger or acquisition. These are actually really big things. Like, can we target communications based on actual behavior? Can we automate something before the employees ever knew there was a problem? These are actually the really, really exciting things. So to us, sort of the platform is less of a, I don't know, I would say like less of a predefined solution and more of a canvas of creativity. And that's what we as a business, and obviously what Qualcomm is doing, is working together to say, okay, let's push this thing beyond, as a lot of our teams say, beyond its natural limits. And that's where the fun really begins. So I have no doubt from the Nexthink side, they see something like, we had no idea that, but you'll be amazed what great people can do when they're brought together with great technology.
That's what we're going to be discussing on Wednesday, everybody. You got to tune in for the AMA as well as this episode. Well put, Seth. Well put. And Chris, maybe we could develop the line of thinking a little bit with an illustration, right? And from our last conversation, the way Qualcomm is developing its kind of concept of a service desk and leveraging Spark in particular in that vision, or using Spark to help it develop its own vision of what a service desk can be, is a great case in point for what Seth's talking about. Walk us through what that trial with Spark is pointing towards now in terms of building on what you've developed and what you see as the new possible with regards to the service desk specifically.
With the new technologies coming out, as Seth mentioned, right? These new technologies, they spur a lot of change in the corporate worlds, in the enterprise world, and support. And we all need to evolve with it. And so the advent of AI has obviously caused a significant upheaval in processes at Qualcomm, just like at any other company. And so, being an AI forward company already, we had already started developing our own tools internally. We have our own chatbot that is rooted in our KBs, our service desk knowledge bases, that already employees had access to try to do some on their own troubleshooting. However, it lacks context, and context is critically important. It's probably one of the biggest single pieces of value, as Seth mentioned, that Nexthink can provide that nothing else can. And so, as we've been rolling out Spark, what we've been finding through our testers and through our own experimenting in it is that, in addition to it having that same knowledge-based context that our internal tool had, it has the device-specific context. It has our full environmental context, and it has the Nexthink context. And so when users are testing it and evaluating it, it can provide them not just generic, hey, have you turned it off and turned it back on again? It can look at what is happening on your device in real time and provide actual useful data and feedback on what's occurring, as well as remediations that can actually resolve an issue, right? Not just, hey, try this, did it work? Hey, try this, did it work? Right? That's about the best you're going to get out of a non-contextual LLM. Whereas Spark gives you the context, and it can actually apply fixes that matter. And it can give the end users the confidence to say, yes, try this on my device. And then it will follow up, and both through asking the end user, but as well as observing it in the platform itself, find out if it actually provided a meaningful remediation that improved the end user's experience. And if not, if it's something that it truly cannot fix, it can escalate that to get proper support with, again, full context. You have the full context of that interaction, the things that were tried, the data that was pulled, put into a ticket, so that when the level 2 support or whoever takes that ticket up, they don't have to go through all those steps again. It's done. And so it's allowing our support staff to evolve in their roles, to handle more advanced issues, to skill up. With this, we're able to take some of our support staff and move them over into more like AI. I'm drawing a blank on the word we use, but they're becoming almost like AI curators, right? They're able to help us train the AI on the back end, read through the conversations. Like, Nexthink allows so much growth in career development, at the same time that it's providing a much better user experience for those that are trying to troubleshoot these issues before it has to hit a live person. And when it does hit the live person, that live person can work with more data and skip the really basic troubleshooting steps. and go right to the meat of the issue, and provide a faster resolution for the end users. And with that, one of the beautiful things too is we don't have to do this alone, right? I mean, a plug for Ellipsys, of course, because they have been so helpful. They help us set these things up much more quickly than I would have been able to do by myself. They can provide us the meaningful um, feedback from their other customers. What's working, what's not working, where are other customers getting value, and it massively accelerates our um, value realization in our environment simply because we don't have to do all the experiments first. Somebody else has already done them. We can lean on the experience of not just our own company, but all the different enterprises from both Nexthink and Ellipsys, um, and kind of break open these silos that we all tend to work in, right? We're in our silos in our enterprises, we're in our silos in our departments, and Nexthink really is a tool to bridge and break open those silos and create bridges across the different um, organizations in the IT enterprise. But then you get great companies like Ellipsys who help us to kind of break those silos down appropriately um, across the enterprises and learn from each other and gain from each other's experience. So we're not all having to reinvent the wheel every time we try some new use case or task.
With that, Seth, maybe add a gloss on this kind of these two themes we've got of operationalization and creativity, and what it means in relation to both when we see the convergence that Chris has just described so well between DEX and AI capabilities. Like what do they open up together potentially?
Yeah, I always kind of I've always, at least for myself, I always find you can answer questions well by adding historical context, right? So if we rewind back in time, historically, the constraint was often human capacity, right? We had data, but limited the ability to understand and interpret it and act on it at scale. So AI starts to remove that constraint, right? So suddenly we're kind of moving from dashboards that tell us what happened towards an approach that understands context and recommends action, and you can increasingly execute that, right? So we are literally in this revolution right now, for better or worse, depending on which side you're on. But AI, the only caveat I'll add to it, though, to be very fair and maybe borderline provocative, is AI, as I think is a common theme, is it is only as valuable as the context and the operating discipline around it, right? So if your data is poorly understood by X, Y, Z, whatever it may be, your understanding, what comes out obviously isn't going to be trusted, and then if you don't have processes defined around it, nobody kind of knows what good looks like, but they just love the idea that something is being thrown in their face, right? So AI, to us, in a weird way, it can help you make bad decisions faster if you're not careful, right? And I think we've seen that happen in various scenarios. There's lots of fun social media around it, right, as well. So I would say I think DEX does become more important in our world, though, and not less. DEX is giving that very rich context, and I always use that word context because volume isn't the same as contextual relevancy of data, right? Years ago, it was like, as long as I had lots of data, I could do things, whereas context is more critical, which is what at its core makes Nexthink so fundamentally unique. So AI is providing this sort of new way to interpret it, but then act upon that context. And that's the thing, it's bringing it even closer to act and get, again, to value, right? Not to keep beating that drum, but that's why people buy technology in the first place. They don't buy it to have fun and just to play around with a new shiny tool. They're doing it for a business reason. Like I love what Chris mentioned around careers. Yes, when you lean into a rapidly evolving and emerging market, your own individual, what you become, the opportunities are endless, right? And that's why at least we're excited, obviously working with Chris and the team there as well, is that we're pushing the boundaries of everything. It's just unlocking new sort of frontiers. So so that's sort of how I would summarize it in the AI world. Bit of risk, right? But carefully managed, governed. I always say the upside is what you should play for, not trying to protect the worst case scenario.
So let's get final thoughts, gentlemen, on something that feels very, very relevant to this, which is this notion positive and negative, risk and reward of democratization of DEX. Start with you, Seth. So you were kind of circling a little bit there. To what extent should how do we break those silos down that Chris was talking about, or how is it done carefully and properly? How should it be done?
Yes. Okay. No, really good question. It's the concept of democratizing DEX can often be misinterpreted as just giving everyone access to a piece of technology. It's not that, right? Democratizing DEX is kind of taking, again, that contextual information that historically would have lived inside a specialist team or inside a dashboard and putting it into the hands of people who can actually do something with it. So it's connecting the context to the relevance of the responsibility of the individuals, bringing them together to affect change, right? So, for example, the service desk shouldn't really need to come to a Nexthink expert to benefit from DEX, or someone who's responsible for business critical applications. They shouldn't have to understand the entire platform, right? And a CIO shouldn't have to navigate 20 dashboards and be trained to be able to get value from it, right? So when we talk about democratization, it's really about making the capability accessible and actually useful. And this is the key part, at the point of decision, right? One of our team members, he always says, he's like, when customers will ask, can we do this? Can we get X, Y, Z? He's like, but what for? What are you going to do with it? It's very interesting, the responses. So yeah, how we approach it is, well, we would start, of course, with the business, but also interpreting the data in the context of that unique environment. Everything Chris has summarized is very, if you notice, very contextually relevant to Qualcomm, which is great. And then, of course, linking that and making sure the data can be acted upon. It's part of something that has an actual, it influences something in a positive way, or you're able to remediate or react, etc. So yeah, do that repeatedly, and sort of DEX, you end up, you go so much further than having a tool and a dashboard, right? It starts becoming kind of like this, I don't know, sounds cheesy, but like operating fabric. It's like part of the DNA, right? And it's a way you work. And that's what we found has been the most exciting. So yeah, democratization is one of the favorite topics. So we could go on about it forever, but I'll stop there.
Anything you'd add, Chris, to that from your own perspective?
Yeah, I love Seth's comment about making it part of the DNA, because that's what it's finally become here at Qualcomm. It has come to the point here, because of the context we can provide to all the different teams, that we've hit a point where if something happens, the first question is, what does Nexthink tell us about this? That is the first question now, regardless of the team. And there's always been some friction, right? You're trying to introduce this new tool, share the new context that it brings, the new data. It's shining light in dark corners that people don't necessarily want to see at first. But eventually, once you start shining the light in all the dark corners of all the IT closets, and start cleaning all that up and start demonstrating how the data and the context that we can bring really is going to elevate all the other teams' responses, both proactively and reactively, to what's occurring in an environment. Eventually, it hits that point, this kind of a tipping point of criticality, where Nexthink becomes the first point of contact for investigation, issue resolution, discovery across the enterprise. And the value it brings at that point just absolutely explodes. And it builds those relationships and breaks down those silos so effectively that, as I said, it's just become part of our fabric here at Qualcomm. I mean, an issue occurs, and as I said, what does Nexthink say? Or we're developing a new product, and can we put Nexthink on these devices and see what we can learn from the data that it can gather and the context it can provide? I mean, I can't think of a better way to put it than what Seth said. It has just become part of Qualcomm's operating DNA.
Well, listeners, if you would like it to become a part of your DNA also, I could think of no better thing to do than attend the aforementioned AMA this Wednesday. And look, if you're listening to this episode and the AMA has already taken place, 4 p.m. Wednesday, 4 p.m. EST on Wednesday, not to worry, just follow the link. And if you engage with the chat, I wouldn't be surprised if Chris here wasn't good enough to respond to to your questions and comments, even if they come in late. And there should be a great wall of interaction to engage with and look over, regardless of when you reach it. And look, gentlemen, I should also ask: will you both be at Experience in Orlando this year? I imagine you will, but you tell me.
Well, from our end, absolutely. If we're a diamond sponsor, we better show up. So yes, we absolutely will be. Encourage everyone to attend. Reach out if you want any more information about it, and we're excited to be there. And we will have 20 plus from our team attending to answer questions, to talk DNA, and democratization and operating capabilities with Nexthink. So looking forward to seeing everyone back.
Fabulous. Chris, are you coming?
Oh, we will absolutely be there. Qualcomm also plans to be there in force. So if you want to learn more about our use cases with Nexthink, or if you want to come and experience the power of the Snapdragon laptops, come and see us. We will absolutely be there.
And that will be October the 5th to October the 7th this year at the JW Marriott Grand Lakes Hotel in Orlando, Florida. Be there to be where the future of DEX will take shape. It's the event of the year in the DEX space, and you might argue beyond the DEX space. It's a phenomenal thing, and we'll be there ourselves as we'll be there ourselves as a podcast, doing some live events, some recorded events, and more. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Look forward to seeing you both over on the subreddit a little later this week. Thanks so much for doing this, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's it for this week's DEX Show. We'll be back next week. And if you don't already, be sure to follow the show so you don't miss an episode. Until next time.